Fab's 5 fantasy football kicker streamers for Week 18. Start Will Reichard. Was Matt Prater your starting fantasy football kicker? Does your regular starter have a bad matchup this week, and you're looking for help at the position? Well, you're in luck. Here's my Fab's 5 best fantasy kicker streamers for Week 18. Note, players listed are started in fewer than 50% of ESPN.com fantasy leagues. Fantasy football case streamers for Week 18. Harrison Mevis vs. Cardinals, 44.8%. Mevis has scored double digits in 2 of his last 3 games, and he should continue to find success in what could be a barn burner against the Cardinals. Over the past 8 weeks, only the Colts have given up more fantasy points to opposing kickers. As long as the Rams use their starters this week, Mevis should be considered a viable option in Fantasy Championship Week. Cam Little vs. Titans, 40%. Little has been one of the hottest kickers in the league, scoring no fewer than 11 fantasy points in 4 straight games and 7 of his last 9 overall. Still, he started in fewer than 50% of ESPN fantasy leagues heading into Week 18. The Titans have allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing kickers since Week 10, so Little should once again post a nice stat line. Cairo Santos vs. Lions, 42.9%. Santos' numbers have been somewhat mid lately, as he's scored more than 8 fantasy points just once in his last 6 games. Still, this week's matchup against the Lions makes him a viable streamer. Their defense has given up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing kickers in the last 8 weeks, and 5 booters have beaten them for double-digit points since Week 11. Will Reichard vs. Packers, 13.9%. Reichard has been on fire in the last month, scoring 10 or more points 4 times in his past 5 games. That includes a Week 12 game against this week's opponent, the Packers, where he scored 10 points. Green Bay is expected to rest a lot of starters this week as well, so the Vikings should be able to move the ball on offense and put Reichard in a position to score fantasy points. Charlie Smith at Falcons, 0.3%. You might not know it, but Smith has scored a combined 42 fantasy points in his last 3 games. That includes making 9 of his 11 field goal attempts. I'd stream him against the Falcons, who have been generous to opposing kickers lately. In fact, their defense has given up an average of 9.8 points per game to the position over the last 8 weeks. Smith is a free agent in many leagues.